Greetings duelists and welcome to another video. So something that I kind of wanted to talk about just kind of became more and more frequent for this scenario, and that is the topic of non-engine cards or silver bullets, or like those utility cards that people play in the main deck. As you guys already know, we're in a format where a lot of those cards are roaming around, and some of these cards are really deciding the format. Um, there are more common ones like Book of Moon, Book of Eclipse, and then you have like the little bit more obscure ones like Change of Heart, and like Karma Cannon. And you also have those like really strong cards that just blow out the game, like Barrier and Anti-Spell, for example. So as of right now, by the time I'm recording this video, everybody kind of already knows that Unchained is pretty much like one of the better decks out there. And it's kind of weird and unorthodox to like see how we arrived at this conclusion, because Unchained was around for a long time, and even though the support for it that pretty much bolstered the strategy arrived very recent, it's still been like 3 to 4 weeks before we had our YCSs after doing release. And like, I don't think that people arrived at the conclusion of how powerful Unchained was in those 4 weeks. I think the first weekend of the YCS, when you saw the handful of like really strong players like playing the deck, you kind of already grasped at the idea that unless you were already playing Unchained and you were like a dedicated player yourself, this strategy was already like going to be like one of the better picks of the format. But one thing I kind of wanted to talk about is like, is Unchained really like the strongest deck, or is it the cards that are being played in the format, the environment that makes Unchained like the better deck? Like, I'm going to give you an example. Let's say you're facing tier limits. This is an old school tier limit list. It has not been updated. But shoutouts to Eric. This is like the list he took to Nats. For those who remember or saw his feature match. Um, if you take away the non-engine cards, like the thrust, the talents, the books, like the change of heart, like all those other cards, I don't think Unchained can beat this deck. Like, I think tier elements have a really solid matchup against that deck, uh, and like against a lot of decks in general. And post Age of Overlord is just going to get even worse, because there are going to arrive some cards that's just going to make this deck even stronger. Um, like, another thing I kind of want to talk. Let's take another deck that we already know that like it's in the format. Um, this one is kind of unfair to talk about, because this is not really like Chimera as a whole. It's just another engine alongside it. But I don't have a branded deck built at the moment, so that's why I'm using this example. If you take away those non-engine cards, the branded cards pretty much can take over, like a deck like Unchained. Like, I was testing yesterday with a friend of mine who's going to this YCS this weekend, and he was playing on the Unchained deck, and I was playing not this specific build. I was playing another build of this deck, and there were like 3 scenarios where I just steamrolled the matchup, just because of the branded cards, and just because of how this engine was rolling further than my opponent, and was doing a lot of other things. And like, the thing I kind of want to like predicate towards is like, um, let me find one other example. Let's talk about Kashtira. Like, if you play against Unchained and you're playing Kashtira, and let's say you take away the books, like the book, you don't see books, you don't see talent, you don't see thrust, you don't see like all those other cards. Like, this matchup is not really easy for Unchained. Like, uh, Fenrir is a card they struggle against. A Rise Heart is another one that like pretty much just steamrolls the matchup. Um, like, just sniping cards with the unicorn is strong. Uh, like the recursion in the game they have is slightly stronger than Unchained. Killing this thing is not easy because it is indestructible by battle or card effects if you detach, and you can do it multiple times. Um, and I gotta talk about Shifter because Shifter it just falls into the example of those utility cards that I'm talking about. So if you take away the Shifter and just talk about engine against engine, I don't think Unchained has a better engine than Kashtira does. Um, However, you're already seeing that Kashtira has been falling out of favor because there are so many silver bullet cards that just like pick apart the matchup. Um, and like, you don't see decks like Tournaments because decks like Kashtira exist. Um, uh, like I can keep rolling up the examples. Like, Purely is another matchup that I don't think is easy for Unchained. Like, I think if you don't count the non-engine cards, I think Purely has a really strong chance. Um, Especially since it's a lot more consistent. Getting to this guy is like kind of a pain in the ass to deal with. Like, Purely Street, like the existence of this card just makes the matchup very favorable for them as well. Like, you pretty much steamroll like almost any matchup that involves targeting cards just with this card alone. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to like bring up the topic of um how strong and how like viable the format is thanks to the staple cards or the non-engine cards that we're looking at the moment. As some of you guys already know, the deck I'm piloting this format, or at least I've been playing like diligently, has been Vanquish Soul. And one of the reasons I've been liking Vanquish Soul a lot is because like there are some non-engine cards that are being played this format that really doesn't hurt me. Like, I can play around Book of Moon, I can play around Imperm, I can play around Valor, I can play around Droll. Droll doesn't like hurt me super much. Uh, like, Dimensional Barrier is a card that doesn't do anything to this deck either. Um, like, the thing about this format is that it's so diverse, and there are so many decks that you kind of have to respect, that the moment you try to shift your non-engine cards into a more popular matchup, the other decks that got left behind will probably take slack, and like they'll push themselves into the format again. Um, and that's something to take note of when you're looking at this current format, because I'm not denying how powerful Unchained is. I really strong. I really think the deck deserves to be in top tier contention. However, um, just the existence of the environment around Unchained makes it very favorable for Unchained as opposed to other decks. And I think like it's only a matter of time until like more hate for Unchained is like present, the same way the level of hate was presented for Kashtira. If you guys remember, for the longest time, Kashtira was dominating event after event, and after Doom came out, like a lot of people thought, hey, like Kashtira is just strong against every Doom deck. But what ended up happening was a lot of people were wanted to make the Doom decks work, so they tried it. So the approach that they did was, let's play these Dune decks and just put 8 for the Kashtira deck. Like that's pretty much like the game plan that a lot of people did, and pretty much doing that opened the floors for Unchained, because the Unchained matchup, all the Unchained players were like, well, all these Kashtira cards, all these cards predicated for Kashtira, they really don't hurt us that much. And all these cards that people are worried about, and all these decks that other people are worried about, are not named Unchained. So Unchained just shifted themselves into the format. We still have 2 more YCSs this month. We're only halfway through the season. Like the first month of the season, I mean. So it'll be very interesting to see how it goes from here. I think our third YCS is going to dictate one of two things. Either how many people adapted for Unchained as the matchup, or if Unchained really is just a dominant force that can just play through almost anything and is just as adaptive as other decks we have on past formats, like for example Tearlaments and Kashtira. But yeah, I hope this discussion made a lot of sense. I hope you enjoyed this little bit of theory that I've been rolling around. I think that if you're playing on the YCS this weekend, you really have to prepare for Unchained. There are a couple of cards that really just hurt the matchup. Like I can give you like 3 examples right now. This will be one of them. Like this is a card that pretty much ends their turn. I already talked about this card in one of on the past videos. This is another card that really hurts them. Like you're probably going to see rank 4 decks playing this on their extra deck now. Like I can just keep showing like card after card, but we might see these cards that were not being played for a while now being played again, just to like counter the matchup. And some of these cards really just end their turn. Like if you resolve Silent Graveyard or resolve Inscription, like you're pretty much like freezing them of their turn, like pretty much like ending half of what the deck does. But yeah, I kind of just wanted to talk about this because I feel some people are just tunnel visioned on how powerful Unchained is as a deck, and they're not taking into account that we do actually have cards that really hurt the deck, really hurt the matchup. But if people just are going to be respecting all the other decks that were as dominant before Unchained, then Unchained is just going to take another event. However, there is a balancing act that you kind of have to portray, because if you side way too heavily for Unchained but don't respect the older decks, you're just going to see Kashtira again, or you're just going to see like Purely doing better, or you're going to see Dragon Link and Rika, like and Labyrinth and all those other decks we've seen before, like just do something very significant. One big selling point of this format is you're going to be more rewarded for deck building more than your deck choice. However, the caveat is there are way too many decks to like prepare for, and you cannot prepare for every single deck. You can pretty much have to play the game of like predicting the pattern of the format and just adapting to it. Um, when Zodiac became the best deck in 2017, a lot of people did that, and what ended up happening was that the true Draco equivalent was the better choice. Uh, Even though Zodiac was pretty much like the best deck of the format, Paleozoic ended up like winning a couple of events and even taking more spot, like taking the advantage over the Zodiac deck, just because the matchup was so favorable for them and people were so focused on Zodiac that they didn't think about a deck like Paleozoic. Back on Necros format in 2015. Um, let's see if I still have the deck. I don't know if I still have it. Um, like in 2017, this deck was a super dominant force. It was pretty much like the best deck of the entire format. But surprisingly, this deck won maybe one nationals or two of them. Like almost every single national was not won by this deck, despite being the best deck. And the thing that happened was like everybody respected the matchup so well that they just played a lot of cards that just pretty much silver bullet the archetype out of contention. And yeah, like you saw Chadol's winning, Burning Abyss, uh, like other rogue decks that you probably would not have seen like topping as frequent. But those decks played a lot of hate for the Necros deck, and they pretty much just ended their career, at least for winning events. As it was still the most performant topping deck. So, um, but yeah, that's enough rambling. I think I already came across the point that I kind of wanted to like share upon. I think that like if you are playing this current TCG format competitively, you should actually really think about Unchained, but you cannot ignore the other decks, like because the moment you do, um, we're just going to see another deck doing as well as Unchained, and a lot of people are just going to worry about that matchup, and then it's just going to become like a rock paper scissors kind of thing, not between like which decks can outperform the best one, like what happened in toss format, but which engines or which non-engines rather are going to like pick apart the pace for whatever deck is dominating. All right, that's it from me. Keep practicing and keep dueling.